Gentleman yields back. The distinguished gentleman from Ohio, the vice chairman of our Digital Asset Subcommittee, Mr. Davidson, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I thank our colleagues and the panel for your testimony today. DeFi is an essential component for a vibrant financial sector in the United States. We've dominated markets around the world, and it would seem particularly foolish to change course now. That's what we're at the risk of. I mean, as I listen to some of my colleagues, I really appreciate Mr. Nickel for highlighting that this is an issue that largely unites Republicans, and it does divide Democrats. Most of the panel we've seen from Democrats today, though, has been insane. I mean, we've basically, if they were applying their same logic, I guess, think how many crimes Google becomes an accomplice for because people do searches or use the maps function to navigate to the place they're going to commit crimes. Thankfully, I mean, they are targeting speech in other ways. Thankfully, I haven't seen them make that ridiculous level of an argument yet. But Mr. Van Valkenburg, you're highlighting that code is speech, and one of the things that is at the core here is another thing: privacy. The idea of you would think when I hear Mr. Foster talk about the government granting permission for you to do something, that the government is the grantor of our rights. But thankfully in America, our founders recognized that rights come from our Creator, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the First Amendment is a limitation on the government's ability to infringe on your right to speech. And the Fourth Amendment is a limitation on the government's ability to infringe on your right to privacy. And DeFi, I think, how in the world can you have decentralized finance without the decentralized part? They want a central hub that is the grantor of permission, the filterer of speech, the filterer of privacy, the grantor of permission. Now, you could expect that in a police state. You could expect that in an authoritarian country controlled by the Chinese Communist Party or something like that. But why in the world would we see our colleagues here in Congress, where we're sworn an oath to support and defend our Constitution, would you see people advocating for that? So, Mr. Van Valkenburg, could you pick up, I know you wanted to say a bit about this speech angle and perhaps more.
So what Member Foster suggested, where the problem with anonymity is that we don't have 100% identification and control over financial transactions in the economy, I don't think we'll have 100% identity and control over DeFi transactions, and I think we will have robust anonymity, and that's an American constitutional right. So you have a constitutional right to anonymous transactions that support organizations and causes that defend against discrimination and violations of our constitutional rights. We fought about this during the Civil Rights Movement in the 1970s. As Thurgood Marshall said with respect to the Bank Secrecy Act, the law that actually requires financial surveillance of custodial intermediaries, though not non-custodial intermediaries, Marshall dissented from the constitutionality of even that level of surveillance. He said, "The fact that some may use negotiable instruments for illegal purposes cannot justify the government's running roughshod over the First Amendment rights of the hundreds of lawful yet controversial organizations like the ACLU. Congress may well be correct in concluding that law enforcement would be facilitated by the dragnet requirements of the Bank Secrecy Act, but those who wrote our Constitution recognized more important values."
Thank you for that, and great insight. I hope we can go after that in third-party doctrine again in some other venues. But as it relates to DeFi, Mr. Reddick, you've done a great job of highlighting how privacy is an inherent part of the reason people would choose to conduct transactions. It has to be protected for it to function. But the other part is, for somebody to surveil your transaction, most of these companies are charging a fee for service. And look, I mean, I appreciate what Visa and MasterCard and American Express, I have one of each of those, or perhaps more, they do. They check and make sure it really is me and I'm buying from somebody else. And if it wasn't me, they provide a hedge. And for that, I know I'm kind of comforted that there's an intermediary. Now, I'll admit I'm a little creeped out when the government wants to mandate that they surveil me and hand over my transaction data without a warrant or a subpoena. That's a lot more government than I want. But for other transactions, I still carry cash, and I like that there's no intermediary. And I know that once I gave the cash to somebody, my ability to reclaim that is more limited. It doesn't mean I have no recourse. How do you make DeFi function if you don't have privacy?
Thank you very much for your question, Congressman. I think DeFi, as Mr. Van Valkenburg said, will have at least pseudonymity, right? A privacy over who you are and certain types of information in that regard. I think to your point on Visa and MasterCard, we agree that not only the people who can access those aren't the only people who should be able to access the economy, right? Goldman Sachs and their clients aren't the only people who can participate in the American economy. And so DeFi and the larger Web3 movement is meant to expand and democratize that even more greatly.
Thank you for that, and may God bless you all with great success in spite of some of my colleagues' efforts to undermine it. I yield back.